Let me give you an example. For 15 years, you had the conservatives. As the conditions of existence of the British working class declined over the last 20 years, and they declined worse than anywhere else in the Western world, the British, the conservatives came up with the great idea, blame the Europeans. That's right up there with the United States today, blame the immigrants. Are you crazy? The United States is a country of 330 million. Undocumented immigrants in this country, maybe 10 to 15 million people. And among them, the poorest people on the planet. They are not going to shape the economy of 330 million. That's childish. Mm-hmm. That never happened, isn't happening now, and isn't about to happen. But if people are upset enough, and they are, and if they've suffered enough, and they have, then they are vulnerable to being told, okay, so the British did it. They left Europe with great fanfare, 10 years ago, a little less, 2016. Brexit. Okay, they have Brexit. Their condition got worse, not better, which any fool could have told them. Why? Because that's not your problem. There are pros and cons about Europe. That's another. But the notion that by separating yourself from Europe, you're going to solve your problems, you got to be crazy. It's like if you stop the flow of immigrants across the border into Texas, you're going to make a friggin' bit of difference. It's just childish. But this is what people who are smart people do when they're jammed. Now let's look at France. France has a middle-of-the-road leader, a nice young man, so he hasn't got age as a problem, Mr. Macron. Okay? In the National Assembly vote a month or two ago, 3 major parties contested. A left-wing party that's virtually fascist by Marine Le Pen, the National Front. His own party, the sitting president of the country, and a unity of 4 little leftist parties. The French Socialist Party, the French Communist Party, the French Green Party, and the French Socialist Party that takes the name France Unbowed. Those 4 came together. And you know what the French people did for their president? His party came in 3rd out of 3. Mm-hmm. The number 1 party was a party led by a former member of the French Communist Party, who is still a big leftist. That's the largest political bloc in the French Assembly right now. And then in Germany, you had an election. It wasn't national the way it was in Britain and France. It was in the eastern region. 2 or 3 Länder, they're called in Germany. They're like states in the United States, roughly. Okay, in those, the right-wing quasi-fascist party that has arisen in Germany, and that's an achievement, man, because Germany is where they had Nazis and Hitler. So to be a right-wing, to salute with Hitler, to have a swastika on your shirt it's something anywhere in the world, but to do it in Germany, amazing. They came in first. Who came in second? A relative political unknown. A woman, Sarah Wagenknecht, who is a Marxist, has been a Marxist all her life, was a fixture of the Marxist left in Germany, decided to run on her own, and comes in second. Okay, what we're seeing here is a rejection of the status quo on a massive scale. You got to deal with that, and none of them are. You know what Mr. Starmer, the new head of Britain, his first 2 acts as the new Labour Party prime minister? He's cutting fuel assistance to poor people in England as they face the coming winter where they are desperately in need. Why? Because fuel has gone up in price. Why? Because the British can't get their hands on Russian oil and gas, which is the cheap way Britain has heated itself in wintertime. So they can see real clear the connection with Ukraine and Russia on the one hand and their own suffering. And you know what else Mr. Starmer said is, besides saving money on giving fuel aid to the poor, he's going to give more to Ukraine. Man, this is the end for him. This is the end for the Labour Party. They are creating a situation where the British working class is going to finally figure out that relying on the Conservatives and the Labour Party back and forth between these two is not solving their problem. And why am I telling you this? Because in the United States, we are in the midst of the process of our working class reaching the same conclusion about the Republicans and the Democrats. Mm. This is holding back. These conflicts play out. Britain is a basket case economically and becoming more so. They don't even address the problems they have. They are so caught up in not being willing to face their real problems and make the changes. The empire is gone. And no matter how pompous the inauguration of their new King Charles, it doesn't make it more than a piece of Hollywood theater. The United States is losing the competition with China. I could give you many more examples if you wish. This is a self-defeating behavior, typically of somebody who's desperate. Instead of outcompeting the Chinese, coming up with a plan to try at least to do that, you are, lifting up the barriers. They tell themselves in Washington that they're isolating the Chinese. They're not. They're isolating themselves. And the rest of the world is watching and bemused. The Germans have a word for it. It's called Schadenfreude. The rest of the world looking at the United States and they see an empire going down. And they get the pleasure that comes from that. And we ought to wake up as a nation and figure this out.
Okay. Thank you for that. There's a handful of strings I want to pull on here.
Good.
First of all, just a question for you about the rapid acceleration of Chinese development. You referenced what the Chinese economy has been able to accomplish in a much quicker time than we saw in the West, than we ever saw in Europe. And right away, I got to wonder two things. Number one, as we, so to speak, stand on the shoulders of giants, we should grow faster and bigger than our predecessors. And that's often been the case. The Dutch Empire was greater than the Spanish Empire, the British bigger than the Dutch, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe that's sort of a factor of human nature. And then because they were starting from such a low base, this is coming out of the century of humiliation in China. The country had been devastated. A lot of folks in the West don't know, but when America was fighting its civil war and 600,000 people died, China was fighting their civil war and 20 to 30 million people died. It was a scale that's very difficult to wrap our minds around and how devastating and violent that war was. But that's the era that China was coming out of, right? And so it's a very low base, which can make growth look a lot faster. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the progress and advancements of the Chinese economy, but I wonder if that provides any valuable context. Richard, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. That is the pattern. Thank God it's the pattern. Do we want to reinvent the wheel all the time? No, we want to realize that people before us were smart and struggled with the environment and came up with new ways and better ways of doing things. And I'm grateful for that happening. But I have to tell you as an economist, every part of the poor world, and the poor world is the vast majority of Asia, Africa, Latin America, for sure, plus large parts of North America and Europe too. But let's talk about Asia, Africa, Latin America, vast majority of the people's world, the majority of the people's resources. They are all terribly poor. They all wanted 40 years ago to do something, but the Chinese actually did it. That's the question that has to be asked. Did they build on what went before? Absolutely. Absolutely they did. We have been witnessing, those of us willing to look at it, we've been witnessing an absolutely unique phenomena. The People's Republic of China, whatever you think about it, and I'm not really here neither to condemn nor to endorse anything about it, but if you have eyes to see, you will see economic development achieving things nobody thought were possible. I have a PhD in economics. I got it, as it happens, from Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. It has a big program in economic development, and I took those courses and I learned all that stuff. Nobody understood in those days what the Chinese were doing. And in those days, it was only the beginning, and you could be excused for not paying all that much attention. They were one of many very poor countries in the world who were trying to stop being poor countries in the world. Americans might have read the novel by Pearl Buck, The Good Earth. If you ever did read that book, we had to in high school. Well, you learned what the poverty was like. It was, for a suburban kid like me, it was hard to get my head around what that kind of poverty is like. In the last 30 to 40 years, the Chinese achieved a level of economic development that took several centuries in Western Europe. And it took a good century and a half, counting conservatively, here in the United States. We've never seen anything like it. What the Chinese did was to mobilize, borrow from the rest of the world, no question, but put all that together in a successful mix. If your measuring rod is economic growth, lifting people out of poverty, and let's remember, 1.4 billion people, 4 to 5 times the population of the United States. They were able to do it. Not only that, they now compete with the United States at the highest levels of technology. What we get from Intel or Apple or, any of the, they have their equivalent. And in some cases, they're already ahead of us. I'll give you an example. 10 or 15 years ago, every major car producing company in the world undertook a program to develop the electric car, the electric vehicle, to replace the fossil fuel burning oil and gas vehicle. Okay, everybody did that. And we have many examples of that being produced. However, one example outranks everybody else. The electric cars of China are better and cheaper than anybody else's. They won the competition. That happens all the time. Just other companies in other countries at other times won equivalent competitions. The response of the United States has been to impose a tariff to make the better, cheaper electric car from China unaffordable. The current rate of tariff applied by the Biden government is 100%. So, for example, if the electric car from China costs you $30,000 that have to be sent to China to pay for the car, you've got to give them the car dealer $30,000 to pay off the Chinese, and another $30,000, 100%, goes to Uncle Sam, so that the cost to an American would be $60,000 for that $30,000 car. Okay? There are no electric cars from China on the road in the United States. A quarter of the electric cars on the road in Europe are the Chinese cars. The greatest producer, the most successful, the most rapidly growing car company in the world. Nobody put a gun to the heads of the American companies that went over and made the deal. We will give you our technology. We will show it to you. We'll teach it to you. You got to give us the labor. You got to give us access to the market. We're getting profit out of it. You're getting technology. That was the deal. That was a deal on the table, crystal clear. To represent it now is really cheating. It's like my saying, I'm going to give you $5. You give me your shirt, and we make the exchange. I now have $5. You have my $5. I got your shirt, and then I start screaming, he stole my shirt. No, stop. You didn't steal my shirt. We had a deal. You may have changed your mind. You may regret it. That's another matter. But nobody stole anything from you. And the Chinese, they resent that, because for them, and I've had these conversations, for them, that's the 100 years of humiliation again. Because what they hear is the subtext. You're too stupid, you're too backward, you're too Chinese to figure these things out, and so you must have stolen it. You couldn't have done it without, we are the center. And I know where it comes from. For a good long while, the United States was the center of innovation, was the great breakthrough technology. Silicon Valley deserves part of the reputation it has. I get that. But so do the achievements on the basis of that. And if you're honest about Silicon Valley, you'll know that a lot of what they did there was also borrowing things that had been developed elsewhere in the world, as it has always been.
Yeah, and as should be the case. I mean, that's kind of our role, right, is to learn and iterate and improve.
To make the world better when we leave it than when we found it. China wants to cash in on all the achievements of private capitalism, which are significant. Modern industrialization, all of that. But they are also aware, partly because of their ideology, that what can carry you forward can also drag you down. And you've got to be careful to understand that possibility, to be alert for it, and not to miss it when it comes. And here's how it came to the United States and China. We innovate in this country insofar and when it is profitable to somebody to develop it. Mm-hmm. Somebody sees, I can make a ton of money doing it this way or this new way. We celebrate that. We are proud of it. And it achieved a lot. I'm the last one to deny it. I teach that material to my students. What did the Chinese do? They said, yes, but if you make that the key, if the only innovation program you undertake is the one that is privately profitable, you are going to miss opportunities, you are going to underfund opportunities, and it's going to drag you down. We in China, this is how they explain it. We in China say half the economy, you do that private profit-driven technological, do it. And we'll let you become millionaire. After the United States, China is the second country in terms of the number of private millionaires and billionaires that they have. So they've allowed that to happen. But in the other half of the economy, we're not doing that. We're going to make decisions about economic development, including technological change, based on the social objectives the Communist Party and its government define. So, for example, we want to be ahead of the United States in certain new areas. We didn't have private enterprise to undertake it. Who cares? We'll do it. We'll do it. Maybe the private will catch on later and they'll do it. Okay, then we'll do something else. But as long as we're going to make decisions, and there's the solution. They are able to say, we're going to invest in things that Americans don't. Is it because Americans can't? No. Do we lack the technology? No. Do we have the scientists who can do it? Yes. But we have an economic system that is so set up that those opportunities that aren't now privately profitable get the short end of the stick. Mm-hmm. They're not never there, but they are the ones that we dream about, but we don't invest in. They don't do that. They have a wholly, when they talk, they say, is profit important to us? Yes. Is it the beginning and the end of the conversation? Oh, no, not the bottom line. It is one among a set of objectives, and our strategy is focused on all those objectives, not the prioritization of private profit. By the way, that's what they mean. When they say socialism, that's what they mean.
Right. Again, this is interesting. I keep on coming back to the corporation analogy in the sense that, So, I run a team of about 12, and I set the vision and the policy decisions and the big strategic decisions. But I also understand that the more autonomy I can give my people, the better we're going to do, because my sales team is just going to have the best real-time feedback when it comes to product development. My marketing team, the same. My production team, the same, because they're on the front lines and they know. But also, it does not the balance. If they made all the decisions on the sales team front, for example, we would chase today's income. Every decision would come down to what can we convert today, and we would probably abandon the long-term strategy because we're commission incentivized to get paid today, right? So it takes that. You need that balance, right, of the top down, but autonomy granted, and then striking that and juggling that's a whole other thing.
Well, I could, if I could interrupt, I could introduce you to a dozen Chinese strategists who would say what you just said in the identical language.
Interesting.
That's how they understand what they do. And by the way, they're poetic. They talk about, as I'm sure you know from your hands-on experience, it's easy to say it, but to navigate the differences between decentralized and centralized, to be sensitive enough to let the people at the bottom who have immediate knowledge act on it, even if you're not so sure, you can be. That's a very, either you're good at that or you're not, but that's a people relationship. They're full of that. They're very conscious, and they're very aware of mistakes they made where they, by the way, the mistakes they typically, and I don't think it's very fair, but they do it. They say, when we do things like you guys do in the West, we make terrible mistakes. That's their way of saying, we have lots to learn about the relationship between central authority and decentralized autonomy. And we're at the beginning of that process, and we make lots of mistakes.
Yes. Okay. Now something you said a couple of minutes ago, what can carry you forward can also drag you down.
Right.
Can you relate that statement to the American empire in any way for me?
Yes. More ways than I could enumerate if we had 20 hours. Right now, we maintain, as a nation, 700 to 800 military bases around the world. No other country does anything remotely like that. That is not just very expensive, but that is also a kind of running the world, if not by hitting people, by threatening to hit people, because we have troops and planes and bombs and missiles and all over, right? Right in your neighborhood and not far from. What are we doing? Well, we came out of a situation where we thought this would protect us. And in some ways it did. And even in some ways, I'll grant it does. But you have to ask the question, what else is it doing? And the answer is, it is defining the United States as the holder-backer of what we are trying to do here in the Ivory Republic in Africa, or in Malaysia, or in Paraguay. It is the entity that's having a hold on the world, trying to hold us back. When the American naval fleet sits in the South China Sea, a stone's throw from Taiwan, nobody cares about Taiwan. Nobody is fooled by this. Maybe a few Americans who are naive. This is not about Taiwan. Taiwan is not a concern for China either. It's the symbolism of it all. And it allows the Chinese, whether you like them or not, it's another matter. It allows the Chinese to say, look at them. They are here threatening us because we are out competing them. And neither you or I can resolve how honest or true that is. It's got some truth. It's got some exaggeration. But we are giving them the ammunition, if you like, with which to characterize us in this way. I'll give you another example. There's an enormous opposition inside Europe to the war with Russia in Ukraine. There are many, many Europeans, pro-capitalist, anti-capitalist, across the board, who think that is the worst mistake of their lifetimes, that struggle. They are clear in their mind, and I'm not arguing whether they're right or wrong. I'll be glad to do that if you want, but here's where they are. It's wrong. They should never have done it. It's stupid. The Russians will win. The Ukrainians will lose. End of story. It's a waste of money. And it is making the people of Europe furious because we're cutting back social programs while we fund a losing war that we don't care about in the first place. Okay? Let me give you a statistic just to try to help people get a handle on it. I recently was invited to give a speech to an organization in Lagos, Nigeria. And in order to prepare for that speech and what they asked me to talk about, I went back to reacquaint myself with this example of Africa in relationship to the United States. And I did it because Nigeria is a very important country in Africa, one of the most important, maybe the most important in Africa. Okay, here's a 1 minute summary. The population of Nigeria, which will amaze people, is 220 million people. Okay, that's 2/3 of the United States in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. So we are a country, we, the United States now, is a country 50% larger than Nigeria. We have 50% more people, roughly. Mm-hmm. Okay. What is the GDP, the gross domestic product, the total output of goods and services achieved in Nigeria in one calendar year recently, 2022, 2023, whatever I could get? $500 billion. So about $500 billion, give or take. What is the GDP of the United States recent year? 22, 23 trillion. Okay, that means that while the United States is 50% more people, it has 50 times the wealth of Nigeria. Now, I don't think that's a sustainable arrangement for anybody. No matter what your economics are or your politics or the ideology or anything, that's not sustainable. You cannot, especially in a world where those 220 million are in a position, which they are, to learn all about the difference. But this is not going to work. And indeed, the proof of it was that the people who invited me to speak there believed that. And that's what they wanted me to talk about, because they find it intolerable. And they're upset and they're bitter and they're angry, or they're, a good number of Nigerians leave Nigeria. They don't want to, but the difference between the life they can lead in the United States or Europe or someplace else is just so enormous that for their husband or their wife or their kids, look, I understand all of that. My parents are refugees from Europe. They came to the United States to survive and to do better, which they did. But it's not sustainable. You got to do something. You cannot fob that off. But in fact, that's what's being done. Neither Europe nor the United States is addressing this question. Just doesn't do it. Gives them verbalisms, give them noise, just noise. The Chinese are everywhere, building bridges, erecting schools. It's just, it's amazing to watch. And we're making it, let me goad your audience. We in the West, we are making it easier for this to blow up in our face. This self-defense of pretending this isn't going on is killing us. It's just, it's like watching a slow motion train heading into a stone wall. You want to scream at the people on the train, stop the train, get off the train. You have the power, you can do it, pull the brake. Yell at the conductor, do something, but they're so busy partying that they don't recognize what's happening. And they can do it with or without cooperation from the United States. The Huawei Corporation itself has demonstrated that from the time that the United States arranged for the arrest of the CEO's daughter in Canada to the present when the Huawei is out competing American. I mean, you're looking at it, and the results. Look at Apple. Apple, to escape the problem of being in China, moved to India, which is now turning out to be as big or maybe bigger problem for Apple than China was. But therein lies a lesson everyone is learning by looking at Apple. If Mr. Trump's goal was to move production from the rest of the world to the United States, the herky-jerky, up and down, temporary delay, these are all reasons not to be productive inside the United States, because you have no idea what the conditions are into which you would do what? Spend the money, spend the time to move production from overseas into the United States under these circumstances. And I'm not even talking about a society splitting apart in which half of the country sees Mr. Trump and his program as a kind of fascism. That word is being used often enough now that it ought to worry any responsible CEO about moving for me, this makes as much sense as making a big relocation decision to go into Ukraine. What? No one is that stupid. And I don't think you're going to see Mr. Trump even talking about moving production here, because even the few examples he's able to point to are if you look at them closely, very flaky. They have big numbers, but it's over a 10-year period. Mr. Trump will be gone as president long before that, and so will all the people making these promises. They mean nothing. They are theatric to help Mr. Trump play the game because he can't do the reality. The first is that the Chinese and the Indians are catching up, found a way to achieve much faster economic growth than the United States, which meant that the Chinese catching up, which could have and should have in many ways taken longer, has been compressed into a much shorter historical period. And the Chinese are literally discovering each day what their enormous industrial situation permits them to do. And that accelerates the decline of the dollar beyond what I think it might otherwise have been. The rapid economic growth and the inability of the United States, at least so far, to copy that, being held back by the ideology of the primacy of the private sector and the quote-unquote inefficiency of the government, limiting the role of the government, and doing this even though it's contradicted by other things that Trump is doing, he is a Republican, he is part of that tradition, and that tradition precludes the United States from copying China. They make a virtue out of it. We won't go in that authoritarian direction. But again, that's childish. They're not going to catch up to China if they don't, and they will be falling further behind, including the dollar, unless they do. And there is no escape from that situation. And finally, the other thing that made it go faster is this war in Ukraine, which, couldn't have been foreseen, or maybe it should have been, and I didn't, and most of the economists I know didn't. But that war has produced a rapid acceleration in the whole BRICS phenomena. And one of the ideas of BRICS has always been to not necessarily do away with the global role of the dollar. That's really not relevant. The dollar will be important as long as the United States is as big a player in the world economy as it still is. But it will diminish, and that's for sure. And the BRICS, with the consequence of what's happening, and I say that even before dealing with today's tariff increase on India by Mr. Trump, but you could see all of this coming. This only makes the decline of the dollar happen even faster. And I think you can therefore see Mr. Trump promised to protect the dollar, and the dollar has really gone down sharply, literally, from the day he was inaugurated on the 20th of January to my speaking with you right now, is down, depending on which currency you compare it to, but it's down 8 to 12%. And that, in a short half-year period, is a very serious comment on the wisdom of him protecting the dollar. That's not happening. No, the only recovery I see, though I could imagine, so I agree with everything you said, would be a recognition that they must use their size, their wealth, the fruit of 5 or 6 centuries of colonialism and capitalism to carve out an independent path. They've got to break their connection to the United States. It is the end for them, and more so now. I mean, Mr. Trump is able to make a joke about Canada being the 51st state. That joke will be extended to Europe in a while, and not a long while either. There is no sense here that Europe has any role to play whatsoever anywhere, except perhaps to pay for weapons that can be used in Ukraine, so Mr. Trump looks good to his base that he isn't spending U.S. tax dollars on the Ukraine war, which the American taxpayer does not want to do anymore, but is spending European money. And if the Europeans allow this, I noticed Mr. Merz, when he pushed his bond program through, talked about the boost to the German economy, but is now saying that they will be buying American weapons. I mean, for me, it's beyond words. If you don't buy your own, then what are you doing? What in the world? What are you going to be? An outpost for the American military, a place to store missiles before they get shipped over to Ukraine or wherever else. You're not going to defeat the Russians. It's ridiculous. Napoleon couldn't. Hitler couldn't. Mr. Starmer, you must be kidding. Nobody. The United States can't do it. You know, the world is a very, very different place. Europe is rich. Europe is big. Europe should be playing a big role, but it's got to unify and it's got to cut the umbilical cord with the United States, or else it has no. Watch it, you know, and it's not just what they do, Glenn. It's watching the speech, the von der Leyen or the NATO head, or when they talk, the United States literally kicks them in the nose, and they talk sweetly about the United States. What? You know, they announce a big tariff and they say, well, we will retaliate, and then they don't. You know, that's even worse than simply caving in, this performance that we won't even listen to our own words in this situation. We are so determined to go with the United States against Russia. It strikes me as so sad. And you know, I look at Jean-Luc Mélenchon in France. I look at Sarah Wagenknecht in Germany. And I'm wondering,
Are these people going to be able to come up with a way of doing that, or will it go to the Alternative für Deutschland or for Le Pen and those people? Because the rest of their political system is simply a politics of we're not either one of those, which the people already know, and that's not a program. It just, there is a last point I would stress. For a number of technical reasons, the consequence of declaring economic war on the whole world, which is Mr. Trump's policy, with tariffs, with trade arrangements, with sanctions, that's really all part of it. For technical reasons, it has not yet hit the American economy the way I believe it will. And of course, I can be wrong, but I've been doing this all my adult life, watching the U.S. economy. What I see coming, and I mean it in the second half of this year, so we're talking in the second half of 2025, you're going to begin to see serious signs of recession coupled with serious signs of inflation. And this is going to put difficulties for Mr. Trump far greater than anything he has seen so far. And the labor movement is moving here. The political climate is not good for him. So even his own base is more and more divided. They don't like what they're doing with the health care. Kennedy is a disaster there. They don't like the level of persecution of immigrants is overdone and has now produced a backlash. There really is widespread horror over what is going on in Gaza and Mr. Trump's and there's lots of speculation that he has to support Netanyahu because the Israeli police included Mr. Epstein and that they have material he cannot risk being, and again, you never know with those things and you never know what to believe, but that is now being spoken, including by many who were his strongest supporters who are talking like this. You're watching disintegration. At this point, I would say to you, it's no longer a question, will he disintegrate? Now the question is, he is disintegrating. Will he be able to find some way to slow this, to stop it, to reverse it? Is there some issue, some program? That's what he has to find. He hasn't found it yet. So the showboating about India and China, so far it has not had the domestic consequences. But we have millions of Americans who are now beginning to buy to the two biggest retail moments in America before the school year starts now and then before Christmas. And so we're about to head in, and if the prices go up, then there'll be a lot of trouble here, a lot of trouble.